Barbados has recorded a steady increase in COVID-19 cases over the past few weeks. This has forced the government to implement additional restrictions in a bid to reduce the spread of the virus. An extended curfew and a halt to indoor dining at fast food restaurants are among the measures. On this one-on-one, we get a better idea of what is actually happening in the facilities caring for those who have contracted COVID-19 and just how serious the situation is. A very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Lord, and my special guest is infectious diseases specialist and head of the isolation facilities here in Barbados, Dr. Corey Forde. Dr. Forde, I know you're a very busy person. I really appreciate you spending some time with us this evening.
It's a real pleasure to be here, not being on national TV for a while. That's okay.
Yeah, the last time we sat down was back in mid-February.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, it is. And back then our numbers were high. 7 months later, they're high again. We have just over 600 people in isolation facilities across the island. And we also have Delta. Now, just to describe, I want you to describe what is happening in our isolation facilities, especially the Harrison Point facility at this time on a day-to-day basis, to give Barbadians an idea of the situation.
So I think at this point, where we are in country, we are going through another difficult point. And I always choose to speak when I think that, we're at a critical point, an inflection point. And in terms of what's going on at Harrison's Point, I just want to first relate what I believe is going on in country at this particular point. And the only thing I can possibly relate this to is an airplane going through a storm. And I believe, sometimes if people fly, they will understand something. And it's simply this. You're about to go through bad weather, and the pilot comes on and says, hey, the next hour or hour and a half, we expect some rough weather, but we're going to try to get you through that weather. But I think the important part of that is simply this. For us to get to that point where we get past that bad weather, it will require many in country to act, to do what they're supposed to do, to get us through this. It's not only for us healthcare workers to do. And I think the work at Harrison's Point, which is going on right now, is quite extensive. People might wonder what we do there. We've shown that on national TV before. We've taken people in, for example, but people might want to know now what's going on. Well, I'll give you a brief update on that. So if you think about Harrison's Point facility, we have many areas there. We have the primary isolation area where we have a large ICU contingent of people, all the fancy machines, the negative pressure area, etc. And that's staffed by our ICU staff there. We have a secondary isolation area, which is being made into primary. And I think that this, to my mind, as you go through a storm, sometimes you need things to keep you steady. And I think one of the major changes that's happened from February or March when I last spoke to you, which is absolutely different and occurred maybe within a 2 weeks period, was we were able to create another ICU area within the secondary. I think, from my mind, if all the money that's ever been spent on COVID, this was one of the smartest things that I think that has been invested in Harrison's Point in providing oxygen in that area. I think you sit in there and I sit in here and listening certainly to media, attention to what's going on in social media, we all recognize one thing, that countries in the world have struggled with the advent of Delta in terms of providing oxygen supplies to their population of individuals who are obviously ill and required oxygen. What we did was to extend that building in terms of oxygen with support, of course, from the Board of Management Hospital, and at the highest levels of this country, Prime Minister really went all out, I would say, to try to have that area outfitted in quick and speedy fashion so that Barbadians, if they do get ill, to the extent that we override our ICU, that we will have that capacity in country. People have seen in Jamaica and many other countries where they ran out of oxygen. And I will say at this point that I'm quite confident that, we have, a level of oxygen supply that is good. But I always say one never knows what's going to happen in the midst of the storm. But I think that we have control as citizens of this country in what is to come. And I think we can make the changes in our population now that will allow for those changes to occur, which will prevent us from getting into some of the trouble that we're seeing globally within the Caribbean. And yes, in the Caribbean, when we compare ourselves to many of the others in the Caribbean, things don't look that bad. But I'm saying when you start a storm, you don't know what you're going to meet in the middle of the storm. And it's with that I would advise Barbadians to work with us. Don't work against us. Work with us. Listen, do the things, and I'll talk about that more, yes. During the course, that will be important. But Hars's point, to let people understand what has happened and how things have changed over the last month. And this is really why I'm here. Because I honestly believe that we are a serious point. And it's either when we enter the storm that we're going to crash or we're going to make it to the next side. And every single Barbadian listening out there today has that choice. You have to decide whether we as a country are going to make it to the other side. There are critical decisions that people have to make. There are people who will be on that plane with you who can't make that decision because of different entities, and I'll talk about that later. But at Harson's point, there are a bunch of young people. I think the average age, as I looked at it today, is somewhere between 25 and 26 years of age individuals. This represents the younger population. And I think often young people get a bad rap for stuff. But I think a lot of young people have stepped forward. We have had a situation where we've been planning. I saw this coming miles away. And we've been planning for months now. We've trained more than, I think, my infection control assistant today told me we've trained more than very close to 200 individuals at the end of today extra to fight this battle ahead, to keep the plane from falling out the sky. We've really trained those individuals, and we started to deploy them across the facilities which we set up across country. And that's important. Training is important and retraining is important. And they're confident. Why are they confident? Because I think they all know that we are a really, really, really important point in country. But I say that, and then I say this, which is very important. And I don't even think that the average Barbadian understands what's going on right now. And I say that because, Lisa, when I drive around, when I pass shops, when I pass supermarkets, the bus stops, it's unbelievable that people with all that's going on would not even wear a mask. And I understand it's difficult. I know people are tired of COVID, but the other end is us. There are many people who've worked 24-hour shifts, Lisa, 24 hours. They don't have to, but they do it. Because they do it for what purpose? To protect or to help people, right? I myself, there are many nights that I have not slept. People know me, many nights I haven't slept because I've been worried about this or worried about that or worried about this patient, etc. I'm thinking about what is to come tomorrow. And there are many of these young people, again, who, without even asking for any remunerations, have come out in the middle of the night. I remember a few nights ago when the numbers were huge. I mean, I didn't have to ask my team to come down to help. They have showed up on the ground. Let's do this, Forde. Let's get things organized. Let's get, the 90-something people we have to admit, let's get it going. Let's get the people off the bus. Let's get the people on the bus. Let's get to the other facility. People came out because they understand the importance of where we are in country. And if we get this wrong, if Barbadians don't do their part, it is going to be a sad state. I never, ever want to see this country look like some of the others in the region. Mm-hmm. I never, ever want to see this country look like some of the countries in South America. I think this part of the world really has not seen, even in the first and second wave, the sort of challenges that they're seeing now. And I think Delta has brought something that I think that many in the Caribbean thought would never come. And that's the challenge. People always believe it can't happen here. It can't be us. But it starts somewhere and it starts slowly. If I admit, to be frank with you, if I admit 50 people a day, 6 or 7 of them end up in my ICU, or 4 or 5 of them end up on oxygen. I just want you to do the mathematics. If I did that every day for the next 2 weeks, I will fill my ICU. Given the average length of stay in a person on a ventilator, whether non-invasive or invasive ventilation, meaning you either put it down the throat or you have it on the outside, is about 21 days. Just imagine how much turmoil we're going to be in. We have a chance. I came here, Lisa, because I believe we have a chance to make the wrongs right. I really do. but it's going to take people to act. And I'll talk about what some of those actions, need to be as we're going through the midst of the storm.
Sure. Now, outside of the Harrison's Point and Blackman and Gollop isolation facilities, several other schools are being utilized. Can you speak to those at this time?
Yes. So again, that requires staffing, and I'll talk about the impact that has in our healthcare system in general, because you only have a finite amount of people to deploy and a finite amount of resources. Thank God we have the Cubans to assist, and thank God even more that we had the Ghanaians who are on the ground who have been, quite amazing in this fight and battle. And I think I have to acknowledge these groups of individuals who've really stood up for us as well as we're going through this turbulent moment in history. And there are many other areas we've set up. So a couple of days ago, we set up the Les Devon School, and that has a much larger capacity, quite close to 200 individuals. Prior to that, we set up Queen's College School as well, and that also has a capacity there. We have a full capacity as of today. We set up the Darrell Jordan School in St. Lucie. It's pretty close to St. Lucie in terms of pretty close to Harrison's Point. And that allows us to maneuver a bit if someone got ill. It's easy passage. So the system is set up that you kind of move through the system and move out. And of course, people forget we have one hotel, which is Sunbay Hotel. We also have set up as well. So you'll see there are a large number of facilities, and these facilities need to be manned with a finite amount of resources. I think that's the other part, right? So people will get tired. Many of my staff were tired. We were chatting before. I would have come on to speak today, and one of the things I would have mentioned to you is that one of my nurses, she's a strong soul. She is. And she came to me and said, Dr. Forde, and I looked at her and I almost did not want to look directly in her eyes because I felt what she was going to say even before she said it. She's one who never complains. Very, very nice, never complains. And I think it has gone above and beyond. And the nurses have, and I really want to congratulate you for that. She looked at me and said, Dr. Forde, for the first time, I would tell you that I am tired. I'm just tired of all of this. I'm tired of this situation. And when one of your staff who's thought to be, we have the psychological support, mind you, but when one of your staff that you know is one of your strongest people, who often hold things together, especially in tertiary isolation, and they stand up and tell you that, it just sends shivers through your body. And I think, and this is why I said before, I think average Barbadian has no idea. And I will tell people this, and I always say if patients in the facility, they'll tell you when I have general meetings with patients, which I do on several occasions, and they'll tell you this. I think the problem is that people feel well sometimes, but there's lots of stuff going on in your body that you do not understand. That's some that I don't even understand as the doctor. And people will stand and I've seen it up to yesterday, at least 3 times yesterday, young people, 30-something, 40-something, 25, 19 years of age, and they're looking at you like everything is normal, and you're doing their vitals, and you're looking at the amount of oxygen in their blood, and you're like, this is crazy. This is insane.
I want to come back to that, and I want to stick on the point, as you mentioned, the nurses being overwhelmed at this stage. Now, with more isolation facilities, you need more human resources. I saw the QEH put out a notice a few days ago for nurses to come forward and work with the facilities. How has the feedback been to that call?
Yeah, I can't speak directly to that, Lisa, but what I would say is that I would expect the nursing fraternity to stand up, and they have in the past. And like I said, the nurses we have on the ground work really hard. I know their contingency plans for these things, but like I said, they're only a finite amount of resources. And you can't work people above and beyond and burn themselves out, because then you're just going to lose the battle. You're going to crash, basically. So I think the focus has to be on, getting nurses to come forward to assist in the area, but also recognize that despite that, them coming forward in for the isolation facilities, there still needs to be a continuous level of care within the community. There's still diabetes. There's still hypertension. There are still people who have heart attacks and strokes and pulmonary embolisms. There are people who still have those things, and they still need that level of care as well. So although we need them in isolation, we also need nurses as well within the general hospital system. Within our polyclinic sector, it still has to continue. Vaccinations with other vaccines need to continue. Maternal health care needs to continue. People who come to fast track, for example, that still needs to continue. So this is why health systems globally have overrun. I don't think there's any country on earth that has gotten this totally correct. But I think we'll learn as we go along, and we have to put the resources in places which are going to take care of all of every single Barbadian. And I think that's generally and honestly where we're going at this particular point. But this is certainly, Lisa, a very, very difficult time. Like I said before, I almost feel that we're 5 minutes from entering a storm. And we're feeling the first set of winds as the airplane goes in. And it's up to us if we're going to make it through or if it's going to be tragic. I don't want to see any Barbadians die. You would have known that we'd have had deaths recently. And honestly, if we continue on this trajectory, we will look no different than many of our Caribbean neighbors. I think many Barbadians believe that God is a Barbadian. But I think I'm going to say this, if I'm allowed to say, is that we as Barbadians need to put our faith in God. Yes, I totally believe that as a Christian. But what I also believe is this. I believe that God has given people or persons a vision, ideas, principle, but He's also given people knowledge to help guide you through the storm. And if you don't take it, then what do you expect at the end?
And as they say, faith without works is dead.
That's right.
No, I spoke to Nurse Brathwaite about 2-3 weeks ago. She had severe COVID-19 symptoms. She also has long COVID. She has diabetes. She never had diabetes before. She's dealing with heart issues, and she still has issues breathing. Now, you said even in your profession, things are happening in people's bodies that you cannot explain. Break that down for me as best as you can.
So I remember this nurse specifically because I would have managed her at Black Mangala during a very difficult time, and she was scared. I remember specifically this because I remember somebody would have died literally within her vicinity, and it's quite difficult. I think for those who get through COVID well, good for you, but everyone won't, and it was difficult for her. I just seen, and being a nurse, understanding what was going on, it was even more difficult. She got through that first part of the disease, but on going home, she has some challenges. Post-COVID syndrome is real. There are many post-COVID syndromes. People call it long COVID, or whatever you want to call it. And many of those things can be neurological. So from fogginess in the brain to a bit of memory impairment to some other fancy neurological signs. But it can also be, we've seen in some individuals, development of diabetes progression, which is something that's already here in Barbados. We well know, probably one of the worst in the Caribbean in terms of statistics. And then other things as well. We've seen people who develop thyroid disease after, for example. It's another classical one as well. Hair loss is another one that people don't think about. There's a lot of debate as to whether there's any impact in terms of impotence, for example. That's a big debate, a raging debate that's going on right now. So there are many other things. So people think, oh, it's just COVID and I get that and I had much symptoms or whatever. It's just the flu. But the post complications are real and people have experienced them. I think if I look back at this particular pandemic and this infection in Barbados, one of the areas I think if I look back and say, hey, Corey, you need to probably pay a little bit more attention to is the post-COVID manifestations, which are severe. We know the ones in kids. I'm not a pediatrician, but we know the ones in kids can even lead to fatalities in children as well. So this is not a joke. It's not just, I don't really care. You don't know if it's going to be you, and that's exactly the problem, right? You're flying in a plane, Lisa. You don't know who the pilot is. You just hear a voice, but you don't know who it is. Are you going to make bad decisions? Are they going to make bad decisions, Or are they going to make a good decision? You don't know. But I think you have to, Barbadians have to be trusting. They have to understand that decisions that are made have consequences. And I think if they work with us through this difficult time, if they listen, if they do some of the things which I think are important, which I'll speak about later, then I honestly believe that we may be able to pull this back from a very turbulent experience.
But I wanted to stick on that point you made earlier about 19, 20-year-olds. You're taking their vitals. They seem normal, but their oxygen levels and other stats are off the charts.
You say it's crazy. It's crazy. And I'll share something you probably don't know. I think less than a week ago, a few days ago, I would say, we had one of our first deliveries in Barbados with a COVID positive mother. Baby's fine, mommy's fine. They're young. But go back to exactly what you were saying just now. For me, as a physician, knowing when people's oxygen in their blood drop low, how they're supposed to respond, COVID is something different. 31 years old, I could call the numbers because I remember each and every one of them like every day, 31 years old, 41 years old, 19-year-old. They're all scared when you tell them the oxygen in their blood. But the problem is, at that point, they feel well. And I keep saying, if you hear me say it over and over again, you feel well until you don't. And your body can only sustain that sort of level for a certain time. And then things go downhill.
Right, I was about to get to that because with Nurse Braffett, for instance, she said that she deteriorated very quickly.
And this is the point. This is the point, Lisa. I keep telling the patients when I have the patients meeting, if any of them ever called in on a call-in program, and they'll say, Dr. Forde always says this, I know you feel well, you want to go home, you think everything's okay, and you don't know why you're here. And some of those people are the people that we pull out on a daily basis. A day ago, we pulled 3 or 4 people, right, out of our tertiary isolation area, who are all young. They're not old people. They're all young people who are now in the ICU. And this is exactly it. They were well until they were not. And it happens extremely quickly. So in the morning, you're feeling fine. You have an itchy throat. You take your vitals. The stats are like 96%. We're watching you carefully. And by evening, by night, you're short of breath. Somebody in the room is calling out. And we go into action. This is how it's been. Well, we're admitting 93 people. This is what I'm telling people. You just got to listen. You just got to wear your mask. You just have to go and get vaccinated and be done with this, right? We have to get back some sense of normalcy in our healthcare system, in our lives, in our daily living. We have to. But it's up to what people do. Nobody wants to lock down, right? I don't want to lock down.
But we have a slowdown now.
I don't want to lock down. I don't even want to slow down. But the truth is, Lisa, to be honest, people say that, but then they don't do the things that make sense, right? I think it's the Prime Minister who says, apply your heart to common sense.
Yes, incline your heart to
incline your heart. There you go. Right? Incline your heart to common sense. I'm like, if you don't want something bad to happen, but you know there's something that can help you from getting there, and people who have the knowledge to help guide you through that, right? Then do it. I know if I get COVID, I know if you get COVID, what complications can come out. I know the complications. I know I can end up on a ventilator. I might not, but I might. Who does that impact? That impact our healthcare system, yes. That impact the workers, working for more than 21 days trying to save your life on a ventilator. That involves young people coming in and cleaning and making sure the environment is clean. That also involves your own family, your children. You might not be there with them. I think Sophia's story is excellent. It impacts your children. It impacts what goes on in your household. If you're the only sole breadwinner in your household, how does that impact you? These are the things that you got to think about. It's not a joke. It's not fun. It impacts every single thing along the line. It impacts the whole country. If things continue to spread, I'm no politician, but if things continue to spread, the same things that we would need to help us are not going to be there.
How has Delta changed things?
Delta has ravaged the globe. And if I use Iceland as an example, they're fully well vaccinated. And although they have cases of COVID, people are not toppling over death. I don't think they had a death for a long time. And Delta has changed the landscape of what we think. And there may be other variants. The longer we take to get vaccinated and stop some of the spread of these variants, the longer we will remain in this sort of state globally. Delta has changed that platform for us. Delta is extremely transmissible. Like extremely transmissible, Lisa. Extremely transmissible. If I live in a household and one person has Delta and nobody's wearing a mask and the person's coughing or sneezing or talking or singing because they're feeling well and they're singing like normal, you could be assured that everybody in that household is like that. And I will tell you, that's what Harson's Point looks like. Families in droves are coming down with COVID. If one get missed, they'll get caught in 5 days on a repeat test. You're having multiple families across the country being admitted to the facility. And people within those families are getting ill.
And since we last spoke in February, you're now seeing a lot more children.
Yes, it is heartbreaking, Lisa. Honestly, it is heartbreaking. You know why it's heartbreaking? It's because we have the capacity to change that. The adults, can I share that? As I said that just now, I remember something. There's this young, I will never forget him for the rest of my life, honestly. There's this young English young man. He was about 8 or 9 years old. I can't call his name, but that would be inappropriate. 8, 9 years old. I never forget. I went I saw him with his mother. His mother was so nervous and scared, traveling from the UK and coming in with COVID, etc. Understandably. And I could say I've never met anyone like him. He was like laughing. He's like, "Doctor." I'm like, "Hi, are you okay?" He's like, "Yes, I'm fine." And his mother's like, "Oh, I hope he doesn't get sick." He said, "Mommy, I told you, right? Stay positive and remain stay positive and remain negative." That's what we all have to do because his mother was negative at the time. And you know what he told me? He told me something that stood with me. He said, Dr. Mann, that's what he called me, Dr. Mann, you know that it's the adult's fault. Like, what do you mean by that? He said, if they would just listen and take the vaccine, it could make a big difference, and then I could go back to school and be normal. And that struck me, and it stood with me to this day. That I always tell people when they're weary and stuff, I say, stay positive. That's a message for Barbados tonight or this evening.
And dealing with children is completely different than dealing with adults. How are your facilities set up to deal with kids?
It is. We had created a playroom for kids. We did that with some help from Corporate Barbados. Lots of help from Corporate Barbados. We set up a playroom. We have benches outside. We wanted to have, slides and swingers and those stuff. We really did. We asked, but we didn't really, anyone really stepped forward for that, to be honest. And a Serenity Garden at the back, which we've tried to, the kids can play in and stuff. Something we're still working on. And dealing with kids is tricky. I am not a pediatrician, but we are in close contact. The pediatricians work with us on a day-to-day basis, in terms of referrals when we're unsure about certain stuff, etc. But the thing with kids is kids are obviously, they're not like adults. They don't want to stay in the room. They want to go outside and play. And we allow that. So they go outside, they play football, football, cricket. I saw them playing cricket a few days ago. And at one point I stood from on the other side of primary, and I'm like, it looks like a primary school, like literally a primary school with kids out at lunchtime playing. And that struck a note in my head that these are the ones, Lisa, below that age group. And I know there's some studies going on now about vaccine in children, and that probably will come out later in the year. But these are the ones who can't protect themselves. And that's the point I was making before when they say you're going through a storm. They're the ones that on the plane that can't protect themselves. We have the capacity to do that. The question is why we don't. Some people say, I can wait till next week. I can wait till next year. I can wait till a year and see what happens, right? But the decisions and choices that people are making impacts people who are helpless. It impacts people who can't take the vaccination. It impacts people like kids who are not in that genre that we have the evidence to say that they can take the vaccinations at this point. It can impact them, and it can lead to their deaths.
And most of the children, they have mild symptoms. They tend to have mild
So
symptoms.
to be frankly honest, most of them have mild symptoms. We had a few kids who got a bit nervous, who got a bit moderate illness, but we have to pull them back quickly. Children are resilient. But they're resilient, but they also can spread the virus just like anyone else.
Yeah. And we're getting a daily report now on the number of vaccinated versus unvaccinated persons in isolation. And they continue to be, those in primary isolation continue to be those who are unvaccinated.
Yeah. We do have one person in primary who's vaccinated, yeah. The others are unvaccinated, and I think that tells the story. I mean, coming out to the large, not yet complicated, but coming out to some large studies done internationally is quite clear, you know. And I think one of the worst studies is probably coming out of Israel in terms of that data. 7% of people vaccinated can still get ill and hospitalized.
Right.
We know that. I think if you tell people if you get vaccinated you can't get sick, you'll be lying. I'm not about that. I'm very straightforward. But the probability is you won't, right? So 93% of people won't, and 93% is a large percentage. 7% of people might, but we know for sure the other side. If you're not vaccinated, your overall risk for hospitalization are overrunning our healthcare system, and I think we're at that juncture, to be frankly honest with you. Right, overrunning our healthcare system, you know, that risk is there. Based on sheer fact that I think as of today, and I know probably by the time this airs, the numbers are certainly going to be different. So nobody chastise me because the time you're listening to this, it might be 40 people or it might be 20 people. But the majority of them are in ventilator support. I think there's only one as of today who's not in ventilator support. And like I told you, and I know this airs later, we added another person on the ventilator just this afternoon. The ICU team is working extremely hard. Dr. Hassel, Dr. Lovell, and the Cubans, etc., and the anesthetic team who are now working with us as well. They're working extremely hard on a daily basis, and it is really heart-wrenching because it's a whole heap of Barbadians who have not certainly being vaccinated. And I talk to them, right? So sometimes I go in and I talk to them, whether they're in secondary first and then go over to primary or vice versa. Some of them are indeed sad at the situation they're in. Some of them are worrying about their families, and many of them have kids, which is the hard part. I mean, there are like 3 or 4 situations where kids are in there being, you know, with another person who's taking care of the kid because mommy is in ICU or daddy's in ICU. That's crazy, right? And the average Barbadian don't know that, or they can't see. I just wish I can take you guys into ICU, because people don't. It's like I don't get it. Like people don't actually. Some people say, "Oh, it's fake." I'm like, it's not fake. I don't sleep at night sometimes. My staff don't sleep at night sometimes. It's not fake. I will take you in, and if I could show you the cameras and show you what's inside. And I told some of the others in the balcony when I talked to the patients yesterday, I will take you down there, some young ones who are looking at me, and show you the consequences of COVID-19. It's real. It's troubling, right? If you look at our Caribbean neighbors next door, young people have died. Young people. As young as 18, as young as 25. You are not, what's the correct word here? You're not, because you're young. COVID, there we go, I got it. COVID is no respecter of person. It's not respecter of age. It's not respecter of race. It's not respecter of color. It's no respecter of whether you have a comorbidities or not. Because I would tell you, the majority of people in our ICU today, I think there are 4 or 5 who have some sort of serious comorbidity of the 20-something that are in the high 20-somethings that are in there. So this is real, right? So people.
So the majority are relatively healthy.
Yes. Young people. There are a few older ones, yes, but the majority are young. I'd still like to think as 40 is young.
Of course.
Right? And 40s. And I was telling one of my colleagues a few days ago that it seems to be COVID likes 40-year-olds or late 30s. And that sounds crazy, but that's the reality.
That's what you're saying.
Yes. Every single person that I can remember over the last few days that I saw, that I sent from one of the schools or at Harson's Point proper, you know, where the doctors are all stressed out. They're literally stressed. They were all in the 40s. It's like unbelievable. Like, and that's why I said, I wish I had the capacity to take you in there, take this camera that I'm looking at today and get you to film and show people this is not a joke. And if we continue on this trajectory, right? Sorry, I'm getting into my zone because like it is hard, you know, seeing and knowing what's to come.
And
If
you
we
see it
don't
every
get
day.
it, and we see it every day. And then I always worry, I always hear me talk about my staff because I know they're tired. They're literally tired. And then they see people doing crazy things and they're just tired. And they see on this, I will take this camera and the cameraman, if he allows, I will take the camera myself and be a cameraman and show people the reality of what's going on in Barbados. Because people see things on television in other countries and they believe it can happen here. Everybody wants to continue life as normal. But let me tell you today, straightforward, things are not normal at this point. That's not fear-mongering, that's reality. They're not normal. And people have to stand up and do what they need to do to get us out of this storm that we are going into. They got to get vaccinated. You got to wear your mask. You got to social distance. If you don't have to go this place, don't go. Stay home. If the kids don't go and run about, because the kids can go run about with somebody else's child and bring it back into the household, and poor granny in the household, whether she's vaccinated or unvaccinated, is going to take a hit. And that's exactly what's happening, right? This is real. This is for real. This is no joke.
Someone was wondering, in terms of vaccinated versus unvaccinated, in terms of the treatment, in terms of the doses of medication, is it different?
No, there's no change in dosages and medications. People who are fine are treated symptomatically, but we watch them, and this is what people get annoyed about because they're there and they're like, oh, I ain't getting no fancy drugs. Well, if you get fancy drugs, that means we think something bad is going to happen to you. The treatment is no different, to be frankly honest with you. The treatment is the same. So whether we use steroids or some of the other agents which we use, certainly have pulled people back, I believe, on occasions from the brink. Whether we use those things or not is dependent on where they are. And we do not, I need to say it categorically on national TV. There is no difference in management of a vaccinated person and an unvaccinated person. The country can never separate like that. We can never separate medically like that. I could stand and shout and scream that. We treat every single client who is admitted to that facility the same. There is no difference in how we would treat a vaccinated and unvaccinated individual. In fact, I will go as far as to say that I often encourage people have asked me when they've come out to COVID, some younger people, young fellas from some very mischievous areas in the country have said, Dr. Forde, it became pretty close. Dr. Forde, oh man, you could get the vaccine now. And I think that speaks to understanding of where they could have been. It's almost like seeing your life flash before your eyes. You didn't get sick, but it could have happened. Yeah. And when you see people around you being pulled out, 3 or 4 people, sometimes a day, sometimes twice a day, sometimes none, right? Pulled out a day. You get the reality is that could be me. And I think when you get the reality of that could be me, it's different. But for those out there who are going along their life normal, or trying to be normal, but not following the things that will keep you normal, those are the ones I worry about, Lisa. I honestly do.
In terms of those who are vaccinated, do you see the difference in how they're able to fight off COVID?
Well, yeah, for sure. And it makes immunologic common sense. If your body sees something like it before, when your body sees it again, it's able to say, hey, look, see you? I've seen something like you before. I'm going to attack you in this particular way. If you've never seen something before, your body never seen something like it before, when it sees it, it's going to be like, are you with me or are you not with me? And all of that time, the virus is replicating. So it gives more chance for the virus to cause damage to your body. And that's exactly basically what happens with COVID-19 and the unvaccinated individuals, right? I'm never going to get into debate, Lisa, about whether it should be mandatory or not mandatory. I am somebody who believes that everybody has a choice. It is their choice. I say that on national TV. That's not a directive from anywhere else. This is me, personally, my thing. I always say I speak from my heart and not because somebody tells me to say something. Everything I say is the way how I feel. But I would tell you, I remember, if I can share something personal.
Sure.
I remember growing up and I remember lining up at school for vaccines. I used to cry because I was scared of needles. As imagine now, I'm not scared of sticking people, but probably I'm still scared of needles. But, and I remember that as well. And I remember there were times where I had fever. I can remember it like it was yesterday. Where I've had fever as a kid post, even when I was IT leave. I was 15 and I had another vaccination, I think it was MMR, if my memory shows me correct. And I remember having a fever. And those are things that people kind of bicker about. You have a fever, I'm like, hello. When you were a child, these are some of the things that you would experience with the vaccines. It's really no different. And I remember that. And I always think back to say, just imagine that I never got those vaccines. And just remember recently, within the last 2-3 years, I remember there's an outbreak of measles in the US. And Barbados didn't have to worry. Why? Because the whole population practically was vaccinated against measles. So even if someone came on an island, it was not going to go anywhere because that was there. And I think that's what people have to understand, right? That's what people have to understand. And I remember that as a kid because I remember it specifically with polio because I remember it was way before my mother died. I remember that under that context of polio. And everybody was scared because I remember around that time people were like, oh, if you take the polio vaccine, you can get polio and die. And my mom was a bit nervous, but she was confident in the healthcare system. She was confident in the advice that she was being given. And here I am today.
And we do have enough ventilators as well on island?
Yeah, I think at this point, like I said, when you're going through a storm, you don't know what's in the middle of the storm, but you prepare. And I think prior to COVID, I said it in my last interview with you, Lisa, prior, what we were able to do is to try to get many of these things while the world was in turmoil with ventilators and stuff, we were able to get that. So we have enough on campus, and then we have some that should be also being stored as well at this point. Of course, if people don't behave or fall in line and do what they're supposed to do, I can't guarantee you there are going to be enough ventilators in country if we get it wrong. And I say that in the context of, yes, I know that the Ministry of Health, etc., and EOC and stuff, we've gone ahead and gotten the next amount of ventilators. But if things go downhill based on people's actions and behaviors, if people don't, for example, get vaccinated, because those are less likely to end up on a ventilator, for example, then we know where we're going to end up. There are choices for people to make. I can't make them for you, but you have to look at the context of where we are and make those choices.
Now, as many admissions as you do get quite a number of discharges as well.
Yeah.
Do you find that when people are leaving the various facilities, they speak to the doctors or the nurses and they say, look, I'm going to get this vaccine as soon as I can?
There are two things people do. I wish, just before I came here today, I got and thank you, and thanking you on national TV today. I'm not going to call your names, the three of you. And it was just before I came down from Harshness, but I came to meet you. And I got a brown box, which was sealed with an envelope up top. And I was like, what is this? And the others were like, Dr. Forde, it has your name on it. I'm like, I don't know what's in that box. And 3 nice middle-aged to older ladies sent me a note. Those are things that keep me going, if I was honest. And it said, hey, Dr. Forde, thank you so much for all the work that you and Dr. Corbin and the rest of the team are doing. And we know that you're very busy, and we always see you up and down, up and down. And we put some snacks, we packed some snacks in this box.
Bless.
So when you're on the run, that you can use them. And I mean, that changed the context of the way how I felt today when I saw the 100 and something admissions that we would have had at the time of this interview. And it seems that matter. People come out and they hug you. There are some people who come in that they're angry. And I understand. I always tell the staff, listen, and they may curse you, and we get a lot of that.
Oh, dear.
Better believe it. And I always tell people, don't do that to the staff. They're already overworked and hard, and it's not good psychologically. People curse and they get on and they're upset to be there. And I understand that. I do. That doesn't give you the right to be abusive. But I understand it. To the extent that you're angry, you don't be there, you're scared. People, when they're scared, behave in many different ways. And I understand that. But I'm encouraging Barbadians not to be abusive to the staff. But when they leave, they're often very happy. There are people who came and wanted to curse and take down the world and pull around Harshness Point and be angry in the school. And they left and they were thankful. But not only thankful, some, as I told you before, someone have come and said, Dr. Forde, one came today on campus. I won't say which campus, but in St. Lucie. That makes it easy to figure out. One came on the campus of St. Harris's Point today alone, and asked, when can I take my vaccine? It is things like that in my head that make you feel as though an experience like that can change people's behavior. It is those individuals I want, and I'm going to ask on national TV, if you had the experience of COVID, whether you were ill or not ill, I need people like you to come forward and speak. I really do. Because I can talk as a doctor. I haven't had COVID. I've managed it. Many of the others around have managed it. Many of the other doctors around have managed it. Many of the nurses have worked. Many of the RDs have worked. Housekeepers work. A hell of a deal. They have been around the cases, right? But you and your experience, to my mind, will speak much greater than I even can today.
A few months ago, you had some issues with people stealing. Has that been resolved?
I can tell you, I am proud to say today that we have not had the level of challenges with that as we had before.
Okay.
I think sometimes that's why I always say, Lisa, sometimes I'm quiet and you don't hear me for a while. When you hear me come forward, you know something is wrong. Like if you hear me say, step forward to speak like this, Lisa, you're not in a good place. But in that stead, when I spoke last time, and it kind of came out, it wasn't planned or anything. Like I said, so I am. And people, actually, when they were coming in, people were like, no, Dr. Forde, you're the man from TV. We ain't carry nothing. We promise. We promise. You know, and it was like a joke. But I also recognize that people recognize.
They understood.
They understood. And then some people even donated
Right.
back. Like people came, they were like, okay, we realize you don't have this or you don't have that. And it may have been stolen or taken away, etc. And they give it back. And that's the Barbadian spirit.
And as much positivity as you've had, you've also had a lot of negativity recently in terms of the meals.
Yeah.
What's happening with that situation?
Oh boy, I always say this. You always hear me say, look, when there's criticism, one needs to look back and see, is it real? Is it fake? Is it not? I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into that aspect. What I'm going to say is this. I think one has to use criticism and spin it, as in look to make it positive. Do your quality assurance and see. What I would say is our meals at Harrison's Point are great from my perspective. I will share it with national TV. I have the same meals that the patient have. And it's strategic because I want to see what the kitchen is putting out. And it's not necessarily coming and saying Dr. Forde on it all the time. It's like I just go and take one of the meals and see what's being offered to the patients. And of course, with anything in life, you go to a restaurant and they serve X or Y and they may have this today. Or you go in a hospital X or Y and you may not like it. And I keep saying, this is the opportunity for me to explain something. If you give me one minute to explain something to Barbadians. You may not like that meal, but we already have a system in place. If you want to order online, if your family wants to bring you food, you can do that.
Really? I didn't know that.
But this is what I'm saying. So they can bring you meals. I told the patients will tell you if any of them ever called in, they'll tell you that I always tell them, if you have a pillow at home that you like to sleep on, that you're more comfortable, we allow you to bring it. If you have a sheet at home that you're more comfortable, we allow you to bring it. If I advise people, if you want to come with those things, fine, we have them. But if yours is more comfortable, come with it. If you have a fan at home that you prefer, you don't like our fan, you're sure free to bring it, right? And then. If you don't like the food, we have different versions. So there's vegetarian food as well. We have a chef. We have our own chef. And some of the pictures I saw, some of the pictures which were sent out. And I heard somebody on radio, I'm not going to call their name, say, oh, that can't be true. They do. It does happen. They do put that little, what do you call it? I can't remember. Basil or mint. Yes, because we're not serving 400 people at that site.
Right.
It's less than 200 for most of the points. Because people obviously in ventilators don't eat food. So it's not as many. So many other sites obviously are serviced by other persons. But at Harrison's Point, I can tell you for sure, we've done a lot of quality assurance. with regards to that and getting our chef. I think our chef was hurt. I can speak on his behalf today. He was hurt. He said, Dr. Forde, I can't believe, but I will tell you this. I'm going to spin this one a little bit, and I'll tell you this. Somebody compared, I think it was something about chicken back.
I saw that
Something about
video.
a chicken back or something of that nature. But I'm going to spin it with this. I, Corey Forde, came up in a very humble, simple household with my grandparents. And I had many chicken backs that have gotten me to where I am today. I think I'm a strong fella in the midst of the storm. And I think many Barbadians have come up with chicken backs and chicken necks and livers and gizzards, right? So I think although those things are important for people, I think the ultimate thing is that we have a healthcare system that is free, that provides stuff for us. And there are many countries across the globe that don't even have that ability or capacity to even provide at all anything, furthermore chicken back. So while I understand that and I appreciate that, and I think it's important to understand criticism, I think it's also important to try to appease people where you can and try to help people out of different circumstances, but also to understand as well that with every situation, every rising situation, there may be challenges and you have to fix them. You can't deny them. You can't pretend they don't exist. If you see a problem, somebody identify a problem. My style, always, the staff will tell you, is not to ignore or to say, oh, it's not true or whatever. You go back, you look. If you have to get somebody external, which we have, we even brought in BTMI at one point to look to see how we can improve things. And they came in and gave us some ideas to fix it. The answer is fixing it, not denying it.
You kind of touched on it in terms of what is expected when people get there. What can people expect and what is expected of them?
Okay. So what can they expect? And I think expectations sometimes drives people's behavior, so it's important. So what you can expect is a bunch of young people who are nice and polite for most part, but tired. But I think what people need to understand, you come, you're admitted to the facility. Everybody's different, Lisa. So people see us doing something on someone else, and they're like, wait, but that never happened to me. Or the doctor hasn't seen me every day. But we risk stratify people. That's one of the things we do. So people who move out of the facility, we risk stratify them. So we say, hey, look, you are a mild to moderate case. You are likely not to get into trouble, no comorbidities, and we might treat you differently. The nurses and stuff will generally do your vitals every day. The doctors generally would not come to see you unless something is wrong. If you're managing 600 people, then you have to risk stratify. There's no other way around that. Any part of the globe is like you're managing the whole hospital at one site. And then post that, if something happens, then the doctors will come see, figure out what's going on, and then move on. They're just general meetings which are held by client relations to help explain some of the key aspects of the facility. And I think that's important. So, and those things like, how long are you supposed to be here? People always say, oh, nobody's telling me how long I'm going to be here. They'll tell you how long you're going to be here. And sometimes people hear, but they don't want to hear. So how long are you going to expect to be here? If you're symptomatic, for example, it could be as long as 14 days plus. If you have no symptoms, and meaning from the beginning to the end, then it's going to be 10 days and you leave on day 11. That's important for people to understand. People want to get that and grasp that. And I think that's important. For example, what services do we supply? Yeah, we have washing machines, we have dryers. You're not going to be left up in the sky, with laundry. But if you don't like the stuff we have there, you can actually get your family to bring clothes and stuff to you. So it's not a prison. So people can bring stuff for you. They can't come in the facility to visit you, but certainly people drop stuff off for people all the time. There were people from a different culture who were there who the culture would not allow them to consume certain things, and they had meals brought on for them every day. And we facilitate that along the line. So yes, these are some of the key things that people need to understand in terms of even when do you leave the facility? Like when would you move from Harson's Point to elsewhere? That's variable, and it really depends on how we risk stratify you. So whether you go to school or not, it doesn't depend on what color your skin is or if you're purple or green. It depends on risk stratification. If you think you're high risk, we're probably going to keep you a little bit longer. If you think you're okay, you're young, you're okay, probably not likely to get into trouble. we will send you pretty close, so maybe to Darrell Jordan, right? When we monitor you for a couple more days and everything after that, you're fine, you move on to the next site. You can almost like move through the system, right? So the only other site that we provide that level of care pretty early on will be Black Mongolia. So some people will move to Black Mongolia. They're probably intermediate risk, but you're just not sure where they're going to swing. And you have maybe somebody have a hunch that everything is not there. They'll go there because I have a mini ICU there, high dependency unit there set up. So that's kind of like how it goes. There's no mystery to Harrison's point. There really isn't. I took guys in there before. And there's really no mystery. So those are some of the key things that people experience. I think one of the hardest part for persons, of course, is that first call that you're positive. Someone collects you. Sometimes I would say in this, I need to say this though, I mean, sometimes there are some challenges. I think with every system there's a challenge. And we're trying to figure out ways and means around that. So sometimes we move people pretty late, sometimes at 10, sometimes at 11. It's not normal. It's usually in the midst of a serious bump as the airplane is going through the storm. So you have, if a day you get like 109 admissions or 110 or 90-something admissions, you have to shuffle people around, risk stratify. And sometimes those moves happen a bit later than we would like. This is something that we're working on. I think we have a full client relations team now trying to work on that aspect to try to perfect it so that the moves are made a little bit much earlier. Because admissions come in sometimes up to 2 o'clock in the morning. And this is why I tell people, stop watching. Can I just say this? Stop watching the numbers online and say, oh, this man said 10 and this man said 20. It's because it's dynamic. It's a dynamic situation. So this morning would be 10 admissions. Like I could give you the number that was for this morning when I got the number. And I'm sure by the time I get off of this program, it's going to be different. It might be 10 people more. So if you ask me at that point, I will tell you 120 patients. Not really, but 120 patients. But then you're going to say, oh, but you told me 90 this morning. It's because it's dynamic. Positive tests are happening throughout the course of the day. And so the numbers are not sometimes like that. So just please, be trusting of us the best you can. Trust in God first, of course. But be trusting in us and trust for us to try to get you through this bad weather that's ahead.
No, if Barbadians follow the protocols, we could get this right. If we don't, we could get this very wrong.
Yes.
You've been at the forefront of this since last year, February.
Yes.
What do you want? And I know that's a really broad question.
What do you want? I want a long vacation. A long vacation, far away from everything. But you know what? That's not the reality of things right now. What I really want for Barbadians to do right now is to be positive, but stay negative. Be positive in thinking. Be positive in prospects. Don't be fearful. It's okay to be fearful, right? But to stay positive in thinking. How do we stay positive in thinking? Thinking past this. Thinking how we're going to get past this. Wear your mask. Physical distance. If you don't have to go to the supermarket, don't go in the supermarket to pick up one thing. And lastly, get vaccinated. Simply that. Stay positive and remain negative. If you do those things, it's like the Swiss cheese model. If you do all of these things together, you can impact what happens in this country now, but not only now, in the future. In the future for you, in the future for your kids, and getting them back to school. Every single child in this country wants to get back to school to see their friends and family. But it's what we as adults can do to help them get there. It's up to every single one who's listening to make those decisions. Whether we're going to get out of the storm into nice, smooth weather, it depends on every single Barbadian. Thanks, Lisa.
And Dr. Forde, I hope you get that long break that you so very deserve.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
That is the island's lone infectious disease specialist and head of the island's isolation facilities, Dr. Corey Forde. I am Lisa Lord, and this was One on One.